Hey, hi, how are you? Welcome to Grimm's Creepypasta's Horror Central. You know what? Yeah, we're gonna go with Horror Central. Well, I hope your day is going really, really good. Let's find some stories and stuff to keep us awake. Who we? Alrighty, we found a story. The title is Every Time the Ball Drops, 2021 Starts Over Again, and I'm the only one who remembers. That sounds absolutely horrifying, realizing that you're the only person that remembers how things go, being stuck in that loop all over again. My name is Julie Winters. I was born on December 13th, 1996. I should be 39 by now, but I'm not. I'm 24. I've been 24 for 16 years. I can't grow older. I can't die. I've tried both. I was here before. You were here before. All of us were here before. But somehow, nobody remembers. Nobody ever remembers. Only me. It's the same thing every time. December 31st, 2021. We're standing in the middle of Times Square, landlocked in a sea of revelers. The ball drops. The countdown. 3, 2, 1. And the calendar turns to January 1st, 2021 again. In December of 2020, my friends and I had planned to go to the Times Square for New Year's Eve, just as we always do. But this time, we were going with a special purpose. To give a huge middle finger to the past year as we sail away toward new horizons. Some friends even flew in a few days early for the event, when Prince and the Revolution said they were going to party like it's 1999. I think they had the right predictions, just the wrong year. But on December 30th, the police announced that they were going to still drop the ball. Nobody would be allowed in Times Square on New Year's Eve. To say that we were disappointed was the understatement of a lifetime. What would we do now? Sit home and watch a live stream of the ball drop after friends flew here from across the country? They could have stayed home and did that. No, this was not going to go down like that. We were not going to be denied our rite of passage out of this year. When Clark Griswold drives across the country to take you to Wally World, you're going to Wally World, whether Officer John Candy opens that gate or not. I knew that many of the elites were being given permission to watch the ball drop from surrounding locations, and police presence to be cut by 80% for that, which definitely worked out in our favor. The plan was to approach from several blocks away, avoiding 8th Avenue and 42nd Street at all cost. We would gradually get closer while maintaining an aloof presence, as if we were simply on our way somewhere else, not trying to enter the square. With these covert measures, it began to feel like we were trying to avoid detection by occupying forces. It was close to midnight when we made our approach. We couldn't go in early or we risked being pushed out of the area completely by the police before the ball dropped. As some random nameless pop star finished a bland cover of a John Lennon song, some random nameless pop star, the 30-second countdown began. When the countdown hit 15 seconds, we picked up our pace. 10 seconds, we started running. A cop saw us and yelled, "Stop! You can't be here!" But it was too late. We were already there, less than a block away from the ball as it was landing, in perfect view. 3, 2, 1. Come through the broadcast in my earbud as the cop was just yards away from us. "Happy New Year!" I don't remember anything after all of that. What I do remember is that we were in front of 1 Broadway Avenue when midnight hit, and suddenly it was 3 a.m. and we were back at my place in Queens. Weird. I didn't say anything about my missing memory to the others, and they didn't say anything to me. Even weirder. I wondered if the occupying forces had been keeping people away for other reasons than a virus. The next New Year's Eve, the same group of us met up, except for John. He couldn't make it this year. This time the streets were full. Everything was back to normal, so I thought. Everything was going as good as you would expect. The flavors of the month were lip singing their current radio hits. Talking heads from radio and TV were all talking into microphones and telling their audience how much fun they were supposed to be having. When the countdown reached 10 seconds, the crowd chanted along. 10, 9. Someone cracked a joke about Ryan Seacrest's balls dropping. 3, 2, 1. Happy! And that's when I came to consciousness back at my apartment in Queens, along with my friends. The same friends, including John, who couldn't make it this year. I turned on my TV and flipped through the playbacks of the celebrations. The number 2021 was splashed everywhere, even across the huge plastic glasses they were all wearing. My phone said it was January 1st, 3 a.m., just 3 hours prior. It was December 31st, 2021. I woke up the next day thinking of what a strange dream that was. That is until I started flipping through social media posts. Everybody was wishing everyone a happy 2021. I thought I must be still dreaming. But then I realized something. The dream didn't end. I continued living every day just as I had the year before. I knew when many things were going to happen, before they happened. Some of the things that I didn't remember would hit me after they happened, making me laugh. I tried seeing a bloody psychiatrist. I didn't tell them that I was still repeating the previous year. I presented it as a temporary thing that plagued me, but I was now aware that it was not real. And I was just trying to figure out how it happened and work with the fallout of all of it. When the doc asked me if I'm still repeating the previous year, I hesitated before stumbling and saying no. I think he knew I was lying. My birthday came again on December 13th, and I turned 25. Again. As I had the year prior before, time then reset. Again came New Year's Eve in Times Square, and again at midnight, I awoke at 3 a.m. in my apartment in Queens, celebrating January 1st, 2021 with the same friends. And it happened again and again. I tried changing things over the year, thinking that I did something wrong and needed to fix it in order for the time to finally continue moving forward. None of this had worked. After my 8th time repeating 2021, I decided that I couldn't take it anymore. I was going to end it in mid-July of that cycle. I drove across the George Washington Bridge. Halfway across, I pulled over to the side and leapt. My next memory was of waking up in my apartment in Queens at 3 a.m. January 1st, 2021. I can't even die. No matter what happens to me, time keeps resetting. This year, one thing did change. After the ball dropped and the countdown hit 0, I did not suddenly wake up at 3 a.m. in my apartment. This time, on the stroke of midnight, we stayed exactly where we were, on the street in front of 1 Broadway Avenue. The sea of revelers from December 31st, 2021 suddenly disappeared. 1 second prior, we couldn't move. Now we were standing all alone in front of the ball, streets empty. Still New Year's Day, 2021. Just no 3-hour time and space shift to my apartment. I no longer care if I am deemed mad or insane. I am telling my story publicly in order to try to find someone who else remembers the reset. I haven't yet met anyone else who remembers it. So I am now casting the widest net possible by telling my story online. Please contact me if you remember. There has to be someone. Anyone. Julie Winters. Oh wow. That is horrifying to just. At first, it's just, oh, I'm reliving this year, 2021. For me personally, that year was agony. Sure, it was good in some ways, but then you realize that if anything bad or horrific happened that year, sure, you'd be aware of it and you could change it and etc. But it's just, imagine you have to relive that every goddamn time. Personally, for me, in the year of 2021, my mother passed away. If I had to relive multiple years of seeing her pass away, going mad and crazy would be an understatement. Sure, I'd be able to enjoy more time. Sure, I'd be able to just enjoy and remember, capture, and do things a lot better. But knowing that it resets, you're not able to move forward, advance, no nothing is a horrifying thought. Eventually you'll go numb, you won't care. You can't even die. Everything just resets. I find it quite funny because think about it. Eventually you wouldn't care about what you would do. You would do a lot of things and just reset. It would literally be whatever you make out of it, but eventually it'll come time to where you end up doing any and everything that you've wanted. And what then? Would you still carry on? Would you grow numb like I previously said, or just you would go absolutely crazy? Because knowing that at the time that it first happened, I'm now 22 and this just 16 times it loops. Absolutely crazy. That's horrifying, you know. Now, for the next story. Let me get rid of this thing right here and then we'll fully go back into our things. Oh. This sounds horrifying. Movement detected. Already gave me chills because imagine and the comfort, security, and just familiarity of your own house. A place where you feel safe, be able to be yourself, be able to just live however you want to. And suddenly it's just thrown off by something, someone, anything. It could even happen right now as we speak. Blip. I looked down at my phone and saw the notification from my smart camera app. Notification. Movement detected in living room. I swiped it off and went back to work. I work medical coding on the late night shift, and the cameras have been a pain in the ass since I installed them. My wife and I put them in to keep an eye on our youngest, who likes to sleepwalk, and our oldest, who likes to slip out of slip out after curfew. In reality, however, it's been recording the antics of our two cats after everyone goes to bed. I spent all of last week checking cameras, and every time something pops up, now I've just become kind of numb to it. I remember the first night I started getting warnings about it, my phone had buzzed, and I immediately opened it up to check the camera feed. When I say that my youngest sleepwalks, what I mean is that he likes to play hide and seek in his sleep. My wife and I have woken up in the morning to find his bed empty. Sometimes he's in the living room on the couch. Sometimes he's in the storage shed by the pool. 2 weeks ago, he was in front of the yard, asleep in his playset. The officer who found him was not amused since we had called them after tearing up the house and being able to find him. That's why the wife ordered the cameras. We'd gotten 3. One for the living room, one for his bedroom, and one for our bedroom, where he sometimes sleeps. They were pretty neat. They're connected to an app, and you can see everything in a 180-degree angle in front of them. When something moved past a specific time, you get a notification to let you know to check the app. It all kind of seemed Orwellian, having cameras throughout the house, but I tried to ignore them as I went about the day. My wife checked them habitually, even when we weren't asleep, and she had discovered that you could talk through them if you weren't home, something that annoyed me to no end. Personally, my dad actually has one of those. So whenever I go to his house, and if, the parents or whatever aren't there, it's just, oh boy. Oh boy. You want to hear a funny story before I go back into this story? I remember one time I walked around the house naked, and I'm pretty sure they had to witness that. But back to our daunting story. Blip. I looked down at the phone and silenced the notification again. At night, I checked the notifications to make sure my youngest wasn't sleepwalking. Last week, I checked the notifications religiously. I wanted to see where he was going so I could call my wife and warn her that he was out of bed. I kinda wanted to catch my oldest sneaking out too, just so I could scare him by yelling through the speakers. Kind of like, where do you think you're going? Blip blip. 2 notifications. I looked down and silenced them again. That close together, it was always the cats playing in the living room. The first night, I got 10 notifications within 3 hours. I checked everyone, checking to see what had set that camera off. The first notification proved to be nothing. The camera moved to the movement's position, but no one was there. The second, one of the cats had jumped onto the couch. By the third, I was sure that this would be the one where something had happened. But by the third, I was sure that this would be the one where something really had happened. I know I've just said that, but I wanted to reinstate that. I pulled it up and nearly gave my coworker a heart attack because there is a face just staring at the camera, staring back at me through the lens. I dropped the phone and jumped back a little, nearly upsetting my chair. When I looked through it again, I had to realize as it was my mistake. The face belonged to Oscar, one of our cats, and he was sniffing at the lens curiously. When I started to laugh, I think my coworker's blood pressure probably normalized again. By the second night, I think I was understanding how this would be. The second night had 7 notifications, all cat related. Basically, his cats were named Chester, and I'm just going to call the other one Crunkadunk. I don't want to read anything about cats. Blip blip. Notification. Movement detected in master bedroom. Notification. Movement detected in son's room. I looked at the notification, finger floating over the button that would show me what was going on, but I ignored it instead. My son had likely left his room and gone to my bedroom. He did that sometimes, and it would certainly have set the cameras off. I went back to work trying to put it out of my mind. The next 2 nights last week had been the most infuriating. The cats basically kept zooming around and the phone picked up on it over and over and over. But I had work to be done. Blip. Notification. Movement detected in living room. I had barely even reached to silence the phone when another came over. Blip. Movement detected in living room. Blip. Movement detected in the living room. Blip. Movement detected in the living room. I made a disgusted sound and silenced my phone. I had work to do, and I didn't have time to watch the cats play. I heard the phone vibrating for the next hour, telling me there was motion in the living room. Motion detected in the bedrooms, and then back to the living room again. Clearly my son had left the bedroom doors open, and the cats have extended their play to the bedrooms. They were probably driving my wife nuts, but if she had enough of it, I guess she would have got up and closed the doors. Now, this is whenever things start to pick up. I hope you're ready. Blip, 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 blip. I was quickly getting tired of this. The constant reminders were driving me crazy. And I was falling behind on my coding again. It had to be the cats again. This was getting out of hand. I couldn't spend every night like this. Maybe if I yelled at them through the speaker, they would move off or settle down. It probably wouldn't amount to anything, but if nothing else, it would have gave me a laugh more than anything. I brought up the camera and found a display that was connected to the living room. The hourglass spun as it loaded, and finally, I could see my living room. In a soupy translucence of the night vision camera, in a dim glow, I saw the source of the movement. Their hand fiddling with the doorknob that we kept on the hinder my youngest was near the door, was someone in a dark hoodie with their back to the camera. I felt a flash of anger. So it hadn't been the cats after all. My teenage son was attempting to leave in the middle of the night to do God knows what. I couldn't believe it. How many times have we had this discussion? How many times have we told him that curfews were there for a reason? And now he was bothering me at work because he wanted to go smoke with his asshole friends? Well, I put a scare in him. Get your ass back to bed and don't let me catch you up again. I shouted as loud as I could. When the figure didn't immediately act terrified and have a minor heart attack, I knew something was wrong. My son fancies himself a badass. Well, a bit of a badass, but he'd easily startle when it came to loud noises. The figure didn't act surprised in the least. They just stood by the door still as a statue, and I could almost believe that the camera had frozen. I stared at them through the camera for what felt like hours before they turned and began to walk towards the fireplace, where I had set the housing up for the device. But they were wearing a mask. Something like a rubber animal mask that was difficult to see with the hood pulled up. As they got closer, walking slowly as they tried to get a better look at the camera, I could see the long snout of a pig as it looked from the wide black mouth of the hoodie. He came right up to the camera, the eye holes blocking some of his ability to see, I suppose, and just stared into the little glass eye. He was still long enough for me to think that I had lost signal again, and when he swung whatever was in his hand at the camera, I jumped back in surprise. Then before I knew it, the feed went dead, and I was on my phone to the police before the notification dinged. Notification. Living room camera disabled. I'm in a little room now, one that usually assign people for people under interrogation. I don't honestly know what to do. The police have gone to my house, but I already know what they were going to find. I reviewed the alerts, the screen grabs telling a tale that makes my blood run cold. If I had taken them serious, everything could have gone differently. If I had just checked the cameras, I could have warned them. The intruder came in about 11:30, just as the first notification came through. I watched him walk through the living room, Chester walking up to the couch to sniff him curiously as he looked around. Chester was always a little too curious for his own good, and it was his downfall then. The second alert, or the notification, had been the intruder as he stopped and looked at Chester, turning his head weirdly like a robot trying to loosen a stuck hinge. The third being had let me know that the intruder had brained him with a crowbar before heading to the back of the house. The two next beings had been Oscar going to inspect the body of his dead friend. The man had proceeded to go to the bedroom I share with my wife then. At first he just stood there oddly, watching her sleep, cocking his head back in that odd way that I was beginning to think of as a tic. This was when my youngest, probably after hearing some noise, left his room and headed to our bedroom. The next notification was a 20-second shot of the man standing over my wife. He had triggered the camera when he swung the crowbar down into her face, bludgeoning her to death with a dozen sharp strikes. I could see, even in the dim light, how the pillow she sleeps over with her head turned red as her skull turned into pulp. But also at the corner of the room, I could see my son seeing all of this go down. My heart leapt when I saw him. Was I about to watch him die as well? I couldn't even begin to imagine how scared he was. He was 4 years old, watching his mother being brutally murdered by this fucking repulsive motherfucker who had seemingly stepped out of a nightmare. I had expected him to cry, to scream in terror. But for some reason, though, all he did was move as quietly as he could into the living room. That was the notification after that. The next one was him sticking his head into my son's room, tilting his head as he looked for him. Then he triggered the camera where he moved into the living room too. This was the second most nerve-wracking time. I could clearly see my son crouching behind the couch, knees to his chest, as tears ran down his face. I was then crying by myself. He must have been so scared. So fucking scared. As the intruder came into the living room, I knew that this time when I would watch him die too. The intruder should have been able to see the top of his head. The intruder should have been able to clearly see him crouch there or hear his quiet sobbing. Oscar's body, or Crunkadunk, could be seen across the back of the couch, but the other was nowhere to be seen. It was only the intruder and my son alone. When he stepped behind the fucking couch, looking around as the crowbar dripped messily, I held my breath. But then he turned and left instead. The next notification was the intruder leaving to return to the back of the house. The one after that was the most heartbreaking. My son, dragging himself by sheer will to the cabinet, under the sink and closing himself in. Two of the next three notifications or reminders had been Oscar, trying to hide as he zoomed towards the laundry room. If my son was making noise under the sink, I didn't hear it on the camera. If the man had forbid killed my oldest son, I wouldn't know until the cops had told me. The next notification had been when I was aware that the intruder, when I screamed at him to get his ass back into bed. The last notification was when he destroyed the camera. I say last because when I started writing this down, hoping the writing, it would keep me clear of the things going on in my head, it was the last notification. I got another notification about 30 seconds ago. A notification that I don't know what to do with. The cops had been there, of course. They called and told me. They searched the house and found my oldest son and wife dead in their beds. Of my youngest, there was no sign. But they didn't find the intruder either. They believed this meant he had left. The front door had been open maybe. And they believed that he might have taken my son. They were going to start a search immediately, but I don't know what good it'll do. We'll leave a few cops outside to watch the residents, but we want people, we want to get people on this as soon as possible. The next thing horrified me more than anything else. This is the part where even I cried too, the narrator. We'll leave a few cops. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Notification. Motion detected in the master bedroom. I pulled it up and couldn't breathe for a few seconds. He was holding a sign in one hand and the limp body of the youngest in the other. The dark eyes of his pig mask stared across the miles and saw me as I sat there in his uncomfortable plastic chair. My son didn't look harmed, but he wasn't moving, and he's always moving. I had already lost so much, and I was truly afraid of losing him too. The sign read, "Tell the cops to leave if you ever want to see your son alive again." Imagine the comfort, safety, everything you cherish within your home. Sorry, I have to wipe these tears away because personal I have a personal stake in this. I've had house invasions before. I remember one night my uncle had, here's the context for this. One house invasion that will always stick with me, no matter what. I loved my uncle, I really did at the time, but he needed to fix his life, and he couldn't because he was always drinking and doing stuff we told him not to, and eventually we got fed up with him. So we kicked him out. Then one night, guess what? He came back. Before he had came back, I remember being on my PlayStation 4 at that time and just having a good grand time. I turned it off and I was gonna go to bed. And I remember hearing some knocking at the door. I was thinking, oh boy, Mom was home. Because she had been out for so long that looking at it now, I forgot what she was doing. And my sister at that time, she was at someone else's house. A trusted friend, but I was the only person in the house. I just remember hearing my uncle's voice saying, let me in, and stuff like that. But I didn't because, Mom told me not to, and I wouldn't let him because he had been notoriously known for stealing and doing shit that he wasn't supposed to. I just remember hearing that knocking all that other shit over and over and over again as he got louder and louder. And I could tell he was drunk. And our patio had like this glass door, and at the back you could be able to see and look through it. We had like this glass door, and then towards like that patio you had like these windows that you could easily see through and see the back of the house through there, right? It led to the living room, the den, some other stuff that you could see. I remember hearing a voice, very unfamiliar, and Jesus, man, it was horrifying. I want you to fucking imagine someone going, "He's there," in some deep, brawling black voice. Sorry for saying black. I could tell the guy was black, but there's a little bit of humor that we can just laugh about. But the situation was still horrifying. I remember bolting towards the kitchen as fast as I could to grab a knife, and I grabbed my dog Bella. She was a little Yorkie, but she kept yapping. She kept yapping over and over, and I just remember going, "Please be quiet." And suddenly, the knocking started more and more. It got louder at the back window all around. I was fully convinced that they were going to break in the house, and whatever they planned to do, oh boy, were they going to do it. But I was still smart enough because thank goodness my mom had got me a phone and some other stuff at that time. I had called 911, and I remember locking myself in that closet with a knife in my hand and my dog in my other hand. I sat down, crouched, and I remember praying and holding on to that knife as tightly as I could. I didn't try to grip my dog up that tight because it's a dog, but just laying in that closet for what seemed forever while the cops had arrived, and I called my mom and my grandfather. Because my grandfather, he actually stayed 2 blocks away from me, thank goodness for that. And my mom, she came a little bit later after my grandpa, but basically, my grandpa had arrived with a shotgun, and my mom had this revolver that she always kept on her. But by the time that they got back, so was my uncle and this other person, and the police as well. We didn't have cameras, but they knew. They knew my uncle was there for something. Imagine if I had let him in, what would have happened? I don't think he would have wanted to cause any harm or anything to me, but the situation was already horrifying enough. Now let's amplify it. This story I just read to you. Imagine you, your wife, and your children, that you work tirelessly and effortlessly. Well, I wouldn't say effortlessly, but you work with so much of a cause to basically just provide and do all that you can for them. And this crazy, whoever this fucker is, decides to waltz in with a mask and a hoodie and cave in your wife's face as your youngest had to watch. Makes me cry just now thinking about it. As your child has to watch their mother being brutally murdered, and the oldest child that you have is also relentlessly murdered as well. And then you thinking that it's your oldest son trying to sneak out. My bad, let's backtrack a little bit. You watch your 4-year-old basically hide, the youngest child that you have hide for their life, as he stumbles across the corpse of your cats, your pets that you hold so dearly. You're just thinking about how horrified they are. What is truly going through their mind, because unfortunately, you're at work and you're not able to do a single thing about this. And everyone that you loved The people that were so dear and close to your heart, just your everything, suddenly taken away from you. But not all of them. Your youngest is still fighting and trying to do everything that they can to just survive. This crazy motherfucker. This is the stuff out of a nightmare. This is the stuff to keep you alive and just, I wouldn't say alive, but just something that keeps you awake. Fucking horrifying. And you're yelling at someone that you think is your son, only to realize that, oh, there's cameras. And they just knocked that camera out. And you know it's not your son because you know your son. Or at least you believe you do. And now you're talking with the cops and etc., trying to figure things out. And you still get notifications to your phone saying motion detected. All of this started with movement detected into the living room. And you ignored it, basically, because of the first couple of weeks and etc. of having this camera that it's annoying. It's a hindrance on our life. This is just something that's just inconvenient. Sure, it still helps, but it's just more annoying than anything. And then, like I said, something straight up out of a nightmare. And you had chosen to ignore it. Something that could have prevented anything happening to the people that you loved. And now, the last time you get a notification says movement detected in another area where the camera wasn't knocked out. And there's a guy holding your son's body limp. But your son is always moving. And you feel a chill running down your spine as the guy then holds up your son in one hand and a sign in the other that says, "Tell the police to leave if you ever want to see him again." Would you believe this man at his word after he just killed your entire family brutally? That right there is the type of stuff that keeps me awake. Well, well, well. We're going to look at one more story for tonight. My marriage was perfect, except for one major detail. She was the perfect woman. I have no idea how I managed to catch her attention. Our relationship, our marriage, it was all perfect. Except for one thing that neither of us could have foreseen. We met in college and she was working towards her English degree while I was studying business. My major required me to take an English course, as did hers, and we found ourselves in the same class. When she asked if the desk next to mine was taken, I was almost too stunned to answer. Kathy was beautiful in the artless way that some women have, and she smiled as I fumbled over my answer. That would have been the end of it for most people. I had fumbled my one chance. But Kathy wasn't like other women. She told me later that she had found it endearing, and Kathy suspected she was already a bit taken with me when she asked to sit down. When I saw you across the room, I just wanted to get to know you better, is what she had told me. We talked a little before class, comparing schedules and going over the usual, getting to know you chit-chat. When the teacher arrived and class began, I found myself snatching glances at her while she bent over her notebook. She caught me looking once, and to my surprise, I saw her smile at me. I was smitten over that smile. feeling all giddy and smiling like a schoolgirl. Anyone would if you think about it. And when Kathy invited me to lunch after class, I didn't even have to think about it. We were dating a week later, and as we got closer, I should have noticed the warning signs of the problems to come. I suppose I understand how it escaped my notice, though. Few people would have considered utter peace and relaxation a problem. When we walked hand in hand, I would get this feeling of utter peace throughout my body. When we kissed, I felt like nothing in this world would hurt me. She made me feel safe, made my problems melt, and I knew that I wanted more than the few hours we enjoyed each week. Her college schedule made it difficult to go out more than twice a week, and my own class load kept me busy too. That was part of the reason why we had such little time together. Though it was Kathy's commute to and from school. Kathy lived an hour and a half from campus and couldn't begin to afford an apartment on her meager student income. The job I worked plus the leftover grant money I had at the end of the semester paid the rent on my studio apartment, but not much else. Another person paying rent would be absolutely amazing, but I couldn't say it was the only reason I invited her to live with me. I also wanted her close to me. She made me feel amazing, made me feel safe. Being in her presence made the dark world in which I lived in more tolerable, and I wanted that more for just a few hours a week. I offered to let her move in, and after a week of mulling over it, she agreed. That weekend we combined our meager possessions, and I slept like a baby with her in my arms. As we began to spend our evenings together, the problems became more apparent. Problems is a terrifying word for it because in the beginning it was more like a godsend. When we sat on the couch, our hands linked, and I would find myself getting drowsy. When we cuddled on the couch, our bodies pressed together. I would lose minutes at a time as my eyes grew heavier and heavier. The feeling of peace that I found in her presence put me at ease, and that ease led to some of the best sleep of my life. I would sleep more deeply than I ever had before and wake up after 8 hours refreshed and ready to start my day. She seemed pleased with the attention. She'd only been with one other person before we dated, but I could tell that she wondered why I hadn't slept with her yet. Some woman's feelings would have been hurt by this, but Kathy had been raised in a very religious household and must have assumed I was simply waiting till marriage. The truth is, I would have loved to sleep with her, but sleeping was the problem. Whenever we got close, my arms around her and our bodies pressed together, I would find myself blinking and suddenly losing periods of time. Sometimes she would lead me to bed, sometimes she would fall asleep with me on the couch. Either way, I would always wake up next to Kathy and feeling a deep fulfillment. I had assumed she was feeling the same way. I often thought that this was maybe a feeling we gave each other, and it made me feel good to bring her the same sort of peace she brought me. This went on for 6 months, and I thought things were going well. We went to dinner, had friends over, went on dates, and seemed to be living together with few problems. I had been tentatively looking at rings, preparing to pop the question and make it official. Besides the matter of intercourse, I thought we were happy. Then one evening, I came home from class to find her crying on the couch. I hadn't seen her that day. She'd been absent from that one class we had together, and when I called her, she said she was feeling sick. It was nothing serious. She might have had a cold or something. I had told her to feel better, hanging up so I could leave for my next class. But as soon as I saw her look up from her cupped hands, I knew something was definitely wrong. I had never seen her cry before, and it was so alarming that I could do little else but go to wrap my arm around her. She wouldn't tell me what was wrong, but I now know that I wish I'd pressed her. I wrapped her up in my assuring arms and tried my best to comfort her in her time of need. My reassuring arms quickly turned into drawing her close and wiping her tears. This soon led to kissing, which led to touching, and then to the bedroom. I won't bore you with the details, but I'll tell you that we fucked. I woke up the next day, her hands lightly stroking my hair and fresh tears running down her cheeks. It was her first time, and I couldn't even begin to remember how it had gone. I asked her to marry me a month later, and she seemed overjoyed. We had been living together a year and a half now, and our love for another was pretty clear. She wore my engagement ring with pride, showing it off to all her friends, and we began to plan our wedding. I was too blind to see that she was making appointments with a camp therapist more often than she used to. I was too comfortable to notice the tears that sometimes came to her while we lay in bed together. I was too wrapped up in my own feelings to notice the prescriptions that appeared in the medicine cabinet. I was just so comfortable that I never wanted it to end. It's easy to get tunnel vision when you spend all your time in a tunnel of love. After the first time, however, I did make efforts to be better in the bedroom. She was patient, seeing I was trying, but often I found myself trying one moment and waking up the next. She was always quick to reassure me that there was nothing to be ashamed about, but I knew it hurt her deeply with having a partner incapable of being intimate with her. So, I set out to find a reason for my sleeping fits. I began to make my doctor's appointment. I said the appointments were for her benefit, but I was honestly more concerned that I might have a real problem coming up. The last thing I wanted to discover at the age of 22 was that I was a narcoleptic or something, or a problem with my brain. I explained what was happening to my doctor, and he was helpful, if not a little bit dismissive. A kid your age shouldn't be having any sort of problems in that department, but we'll get you checked out, he assured me with a smile and a pat on the shoulder. I was tested for every sleep order imaginable. I was given prescriptions of my own, but nothing seemed to work. I took supplements, signed up for new drugs that had just hit the market, and joined medical test groups. Despite that, no one seemed to have answers. I was just so comfortable with my fiancée that I couldn't help but fall asleep in her arms. It would have been sweet if it wasn't worrying me to no end. We decided the wedding on March, the first anniversary of our meeting, and I was determined to make it special for her. I was as hopeful as a fiancé could be. I went with her every stage of the planning. I picked out cake toppers, helped with seating charts, picked out the menu, everything to just help my soon-to-be wife every step of the way. The saving grace, of course, was that I could put my performance issues down to pre-wedding jitters as the day crept up closer and closer. The wedding was easily the happiest day of my life. I stood at the altar waiting for her to arrive. The crowd huddled behind me, murmuring. Everyone was excited. But when I saw her dress gliding down the aisle, I fell in love with her all over again. She was so beautiful, tears of joy and mine just colliding, and I never regretted asking her to join her life with mine. We did the typical, exchanging rings, vows of eternal love, and then walked away from the church as husband and wife. As we stood for pictures, the venue having set up, I made ready to fulfill my end of tonight. We drank. I took even some caffeine supplements, and we climbed into the car to leave. As she went into the bathroom to take off her dress, I walked around and tried my best to keep my heart from racing. I wanted nothing but to make her feel special and to make her have a night of one to remember. When she came out of the bedroom, the two of us standing before each other as husband and wife, I felt like I was possessed with all the energy and everything I would ever need. When we woke up in the morning, entwined as we always were, there were no tears in our cheeks. Only a look of fulfillment. I knew that I did all too well. We settled in the married life easily. Nothing had really changed, despite my best efforts. I couldn't recapture the magic of that night. When I was in her arms, when we were close, I couldn't help but fall into that feeling of utter serenity and slip off into sleep. It was as if all those feelings had multiplied during the wedding, and she made me feel like I might die of happiness. I couldn't hold her hand as we drove off anymore, lest I might find myself listing off the road like an idiot. If I cuddled on the couch with her to watch a movie, I would inevitably miss all of it, or half of it. I loved nothing more but to bask in that feeling of serenity that seemed to whiff off of her, or waft. But I also felt guilty as she seemed to return to her silent, tearful nature. I couldn't help myself. I was powerless to resist the pull of her, and I was powerless to do anything when I was in her arms. I began to notice as her mental health got worse. She always seemed moody and manic by turns. Sometimes she wanted nothing to do with me, only to cry and demand my attention as I tried to give her space. I often missed classes because I was afraid to leave her by herself, and I finally insisted that we go see her doctor. The doctor said this was normal, her medication just needed to be adjusted. Despite their best efforts, the new pills and the adjusting of her old stuff was just no good. Our lovemaking was non-existent despite my best efforts. I tried to comfort her, tried other means of intimacy, attended couples therapies, everything to keep her from imploding. In the end, it did no good. I remember the night it happened as vividly as our wedding day. I laid in bed. Kathy was still in the bathroom and was worried about an appointment we had the next day. They tried putting her on a new battery of pills, and Kathy seemed willing to give it a try. She had wandered around the house like a fretful ghost all day, and I'd be keeping an eye on her until this very moment. I felt like if we just go to bed, if we just fall into the comfortable embrace of each other, everything will be fine. She climbed to the bed, and something about her face just seemed eerie. Then she opened her arm, and I was like a meteorite hurling into a planet's gravity. "I love you," she said, kissing my forehead as her heart raced against my chest. "I'll always love you." I fell asleep, wrapped up in the arms of my love, sure that as long as I remained here, everything would be okay. I woke up, however, to discover that I was sleeping next to a corpse. I called the paramedics, but there was nothing they could do. She was dead for hours. As I slept, Kathy had taken an overdose of sleeping pills before tucking in the night before. It was almost an ironic ending, and the note she left on the nightstand told me everything I needed to know. All these years, I believe I had been giving her the same feeling, but it turned out I was nothing but a thief in the night. Kathy said that her mental decline had started almost the day that we met. The balance and fulfillment that I had been experiencing were a mirror to the anxiety that she was feeling. She had taken my inability to stay awake as something she was doing. She was boring me. I was disinterested, and she was failing as a woman as the result. The longer I lasted, the more she felt like she was the good cause. She wanted to please me, to be a good wife. But the longer it went on, the more inadequate she felt. She loved me. She never wavered in her love for me, but being with someone who was physically uninterested in her was killing her in all the ways. She had finally decided that if sleeping next to her was what I wanted, then she would give me what I wanted. We both would sleep soundly for a change. I'm writing this as I sit in the viewing room of the funeral parlor. They gave me an hour before the cremation, a final viewing for the grieving husband. I can tell by the way they kept looking at me that I must have looked horrible. I've been awake for the last 5 days, and the bags under my eyes look like suitcases. I've been accustomed to her presence, the way she made me feel, and now sleep is just all but non-existent. I'm like a junkie with no smack, and my fix lies in that box across the way, looking at it lovingly as she did the day we met. I think that when I get done with this, I may climb into that simple pine box with her and see if I can get some sleep. I can almost feel whatever she possessed from my seat here